see you into August or something. So we can't tell you quite yet.
And this is our end of the fiscal year meeting, so
Yeah, that's true.
can't really cancel that without doing into the fiscal year in May or something.
I don't see Megan, but we should be okay. Go.
Hilarious. It was like kind of up. All right, you might be running against me, the river, but this is how it works. It's awesome.
All right, guys ready?
Right, you know.
I think I got everybody that's gonna be here. We're set.
All right.
All right then.
We are ready.
Thank you. Call to order this meeting of the Bend Metropolitan. And I'm sorry, we're running a little late. That's my own fault. Hobie, would you call roll for us?
Yes.
Thank you.
Next one, we've got Barb Campbell.
I'm here.
Chair. Bill Chang.
Here.
Vice Chair. Megan Burgess is not here in her absence. David Abbott is going to serve as the second city member.
Here.
And then Bob Townsend, ODOT Board Rep. That is our policy board. In person, we have Tyler DD, manager for the MPO, and myself, Toby Anderson. Online, we have Andrea Napoli, senior planner for the MPO. In person, we have Derek Hofstetter with COIC. And then online, I'm just going to go through here. Cameron Crow, Typewriter 2, recorder, David Hamilton, ODOT reading for Casey Berg with OSU, Rick Williams with ODOT, and Tobias Marks with City Bend Transportation and Mobility Department. I think that's it. Anybody?
So, thank you, Hobie. Now that we are coming out of the world of pandemic, we will be doing these hybrid meetings forever. From this point on, people will be able to participate virtually. So welcome if you're with us virtually today. Hobie, if you want to go ahead and continue.
Yeah, I think for the virtual meetings, we might want to update this slide a little bit because we have in-person and people on the screen. Just remember, you can raise your hand in person or online, and we'll try not to talk over each other or state your name if you're in this room. Cameras pretty small, friends may not be able to talk, but that'll help clarify who's talking when we go through decisions. Any questions? Definitely raise your hand throughout the meeting. Call on you, however I can.
Thank you so much, Hobie. We all appreciate your help.
Yeah.
And that just gets us right to our opportunity for public comment. If there's anyone that would like to make a comment to this board. Hand raise, if you've got a virtual hand.
anyone indicating online?
All right. That means I would be happy to entertain a motion to approve the minutes from May 17th, 2022.
I move approval of the May 17th, 2022 policy board draft meeting minutes as presented.
I'll second.
Thank you. Commissioner Chang has made the motion and Mr. Townsend has seconded. All those in favor, say aye and raise a virtual hand if you have one. Aye. So that is unanimous. Thank you, everyone. Agenda item number 5 is the Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program, which is known as MTIP. These are amendments, and Hobie will also take us through this item.
Thank you, Barb. So we have 2 amendments on the table today for policy board decision. These are full amendments that had a 21-day public notice period. Today, we have not received any comments regarding either project. So with that, I'll just go over a quick summary of the proposed amendments. Both are new projects to the Transportation Improvement Program. And first is part of the Service Transportation Block Grant awards that the MPO had last year. This is for Bend MPO School District to do a survey and concept design for an accessible route to Juniper Elementary to the front door. This will be, it stays federal, which hasn't been done before for these kind of funds. This project, but this project will be $50,000 in Service Transportation Block Grant funds for the MPO and then match from federal funds. You'll see on the screen that the map shows the tentative route that the accessible path will take. Are there any questions on that project?
Could I please make a comment? This project, there's another little phase to this project that's not indicated on this map. And that I am humbly referring to as the Barb Campbell Student Trail on Pilot Buttes. If I say so myself, I met with the City of Bend and the school district and Pilot Butte State Park and our amazing streets department. I'm looking at you, David Abbas, was able to put a connector from the front door of Juniper School over to Pilot Butte Elementary, which means those kids don't have to walk that section of 12th Street Northeast where there are no sidewalks. So my only comment is maybe in future maps, if there's a future map, we might expand it a little bit and show that that blue line will actually extend and get those kids, because that connection gets them to the push bed and activated crossing across Highway 20, which connects kids all the way over to Bend High. And then the other way, it's a really central route for so many kids. So that's my only comment, is just kind of to make the point that this is actually a lot bigger than is indicated on this map, and will make a big difference for a whole lot of students, not just those at Juniper Elementary. So I'm really excited about this. That's my only comment.
And I think Cameron has your hand up.
Yes. The only voice I can hear clearly is the chair. And the others cut in and out.
Tyler, can you talk for a minute and just see if that is on?
It is. Yeah. Can you hear me, Cameron?
Yes, thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Cameron. We've got these new microphones today. We're trying to learn how to use them.
Always something.
It's always something, Cameron.
My question is not related to the chunk of this trail that is the focus of this funding and this project, but I'm just trying to, for my broader area understanding, trying to figure out where this trail goes to when it, the leg that goes up to the south. Where is that
Where does
headed?
it go to?
Yeah,
So that's the 12th Street that Barb was talking about that connects to the 12th Street Rapid Flashing Beacon, Greenwood.
yeah.
So that would continue on to Bend High or others.
That was the section you were saying.
That's
exactly.
That's exactly
Got it.
right.
Yeah.
And there is now a choice for those kids. They can either go on 12th Street or they can go through the park. But yeah, to the south, it connects down, legitimately across Highway 20, connecting kids from honestly Bear Creek Elementary and Bend High, Juniper Elementary and Pilot Butte Middle.
Yeah.
At least all 4 of those schools are going back and forth. Many of them trying to get across Highway 20 safely. So
Juniper Swim Center.
Juniper Swim Center, this is right at the edge of Midtown. So just a really perfect walking neighborhood, except it's the part of our original city that did not get built with sidewalks. Forefathers, what were you thinking? Mr. McKay, was that you?
And this, so it will be accessible.
Yeah,
And I think
it's a
pedestrian
pretty
traffic,
steep
is this a bike path as well?
It would be a 6-foot wide multi-use path.
Okay.
And it would probably have a couple switchbacks, so probably something you have to walk your bike back down, just because of the elevation change.
Yeah.
Right there. So I'm not exactly sure. As a concept design, they'll give us some information on grades and how that works.
Great question. All right.
The next jumps, David Hamilton. Yeah, this page is blank, so I'm not sure what happened there, but
Oh, I can share my screen if you want, if that would be easier.
sure.
Have the slides and,
In here, I just stuck them in there though. Go ahead and do yours.
okay, let's see if this,
So it's more attendee. Hold on.
how's that?
That works.
Let's see here. View.
While David Yamerton's getting set up, I'm also saying that Brian Potwin is on. I'm gonna put him on as panelist, so. Welcome,
Okay.
Brian. Okay, all yours.
Hovey, can you see and hear me?
Yes.
Yes,
Great. Well, thanks, Hovey and Tyler. So this project is the Revere Avenue rail crossing. And it's proposed as an amendment in the MTIP and the STIP as a new project. I don't know if you can see, but I'm air quoting project because this is proposed as a planning phase only for $500,000 to essentially develop a set of alternatives to improve the rail crossing at Revere and the adjacent corridor. And so the alternatives that would be developed and evaluated would include pedestrian and bicycle improvements, ADA accommodations, potential modifications to the cross section, signal upgrades, crossing surface upgrades, and then general crossing upgrades for pedestrians as well. The background on this project is ODOT's rail safety program directed Region 4 to scope this project as part of our 24-27 scoping cycle, which we're just now completing. It has been ongoing for about the past 9 months. The business case that we were provided called for pedestrian upgrades, bicycle lanes, ADA accommodations, and crossing updates, and had a preliminary estimate of $1 million. And for folks who are familiar with this crossing location, you know that most of those things I just listed are either non-existent or substandard. So we coordinated with the city of Bend during the scoping effort on their desired layout and concept for that area, because it's primarily city right away. And the way our scoping process works is the goal is to identify any risks, any red flags, and then also develop a cost estimate so that we can actually program the project. And we need a scope in order to scope the project and come up with that estimate. And so working with the city, the scoping team came up with a concept around which to build the scope for the project and develop a cost estimate. And so it included elements that the city had given to us as part of their standards and desired design details. So we had 10-foot multi-use paths, obviously upgraded ADA ramps. We have the inclusion of bike lanes. It's hard to tell, but the section between Division and Lytle, those are buffered bike lanes. The resolution didn't come through on the slide. And then some rechannelization. And so rather than 2 through westbound and 2 through eastbound, there's a dedicated left turn lane. And rather than those turns being offset, they're overlapping. So we can actually run a dedicated left turn phase, which for anyone who's sat at that intersection when the rail arms are down, you can't make a left turn. And this allows us to run the left turn while the rail crossing is going. So anyways, this was the concept. We needed a concept to start the scoping process with, and this is the concept that the team put together. What we discovered pretty quickly is that as soon as we put bicycle lanes into the roadway, and as soon as we put the multi-use path on outside of the roadway, we had to rechannelize the lanes. So we had to shift the location and number of lanes. And that forced us to relocate the signal heads at Division and Revere, which then triggered a full signal replacement, which triggered all the ADA requirements, which meant a lot of right-of-way acquisition. And so that $1 million pre-scoping estimate became a $10 million plus project. And so what we're proposing as the next step is actually to take a step back and establish this planning phase. Our rail safety program has the funding that's proposed to be used that expires at the end of the federal fiscal year if it's not obligated. And so we can obligate by the end of September and use the available funding to continue coordinating with the city to develop multiple alternatives, not just the one that our scoping team developed on a short timeline, and really explore the risks and uncertainties around, the right-of-way acquisition needs, around how wide some of those new elements need to be, and if we can kind of minimize our footprint further. It also allows us to perform the operational analyses around what happens when we do potentially change the cross section and introduce a dedicated left turn lane, as well as evaluate alternatives against other criteria like safety, level of pedestrian and bicycle comfort, and then ultimately select a preferred alternative. The goal for this planning phase is to do this planning work and then close the phase and have much better information with which to inform a future project. So it's very unlikely to be funded as a project beyond the planning phase in the 27 to 2030 cycle, or sorry, in the 24 to 27 cycle, but potentially this sets us up to be well-informed entering the 27 to 2030 cycle. So I'll stop there, ask if anyone has questions.
Any questions for David? David, can I ask, buffered bike lanes, that means a double stripe of paint and a little more space for the bicycles, is that right?
Yeah, I believe, and I can't zoom in on this particular slide, but I believe this cross section is a 6-foot bicycle lane and a 2-foot buffer in addition to the 10-foot multi-use path. And I'll just stress, this is just a concept that our designers put together so that we could undertake the scoping effort and put together the rough cost estimate for the project scope.
Thank you, David. I would make the comment that the city of Bend, we are very focused on east-west connections and the divide in our community and trying to bridge that divide. And there is so much focus on what's being called the Midtown crossings, which are Franklin and Greenwood, and sometime in the future Hawthorne. And I feel like we lose maybe attention on the fact that we also have east-west connections at Olney and then Revere that we're talking about here today. So I really think these are incredibly valid, you know, though that little stretch of bike lane could really make a big difference for a lot of folks in our community who are trying to get across town and are trying to do that either with a car or walking or with a bike. So I think this that we should continue to move forward with the scoping and the planning. So looks to me like another good project. All right. So we have seen, we've gotten information about the 2 projects that make up the amendment we're considering. And is that right?
Yep. She's gonna put the slide up.
Great. And so I would be happy to entertain a motion to approve the proposed amendments.
The project's a lot going on there. I move approval of proposed amendments to the 2021-2024 MPO as presented.
Great, we've got the motion from Mr. Abbas and a second from Commissioner Chang. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Great, that's unanimous. Thank you so much. Thanks to everybody who's working on those projects. They can make a big difference for folks. That brings us on to agenda item number 7. This is the MPO Central Oregon Intergovernmental Council Transit Planning Agreement. And Tyler will talk to us about this issue.
Right. Just a little bit of background. Federal regulations require the MPO and whatever the transit provider, in our case, Central Oregon Intergovernmental Council, to have an agreement that outlines our responsibilities for carrying out the federal transportation planning process and for how we go about developing some of our financial plans that are associated with not only with our long range plan as well as the MTIP. And so that document, it's a document that's been in place since at least 2015. We have an existing agreement. And a little bit earlier this year, the Federal Transit Administration completed a triennial review of COIC's public transportation operations. And one of the outcomes of that review was a recommendation to update that agreement. And so I've worked with COIC staff to clarify roles and responsibilities and overall just to shorten the agreement a little bit. And I think a copy is in the agenda packet that you received. That's all I have. Do you have any questions? I mean, it's pretty straightforward, pretty simple agreement that we have that just outlines what we each are responsible for and how we'll work together to meet our federal planning requirements.
Great. Are there any questions? All right, if there are any questions, I would entertain a motion.
my turn. I move approval of the revised planning agreement between the Bend MPO and COIC.
Thank you. We've got a motion from Mr. Townsend and a second from Commissioner Chang. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Great. That gets us on to agenda item number 7. This is Service Transportation Block Grant, or STBG funds for upcoming competitive project application process. Andrea Napoli, are you here with us today?
Yes, I am here. So yeah, I'll go ahead and start. So the to back up, the point of this agenda item is to determine how much of our STBG dollars will be used to fund our upcoming competitive project application process. So I put some slides together that contain information to help determine the amounts that the MPO could reasonably dedicate to this process based on how much we anticipate needing for other efforts. So recap from the last policy board meeting. So we originally started this topic of STBG funding distribution as a 2-step process. At the last board meeting, the board determined how much of both our additional STBG funds, shown in red, and our future allocations of our STBG funds would be provided to the City of Bend Streets Department for maintenance and preservation based on amounts provided in the past. Historically, a fairly large percentage of the MPO's STBG funds have been provided to the city. So determining those amounts that would continue to go to the city and how much would remain with the MPO was kind of our first step in getting at how much we could reasonably use to fund the upcoming project application process. So the bottom line item in this table shows the amounts that will remain with the MPO based on last month's policy board decision. So essentially like our starting point here. Next slide. Here are the additional STBG funds that we have, and these are based on actual funds received and also updated ODOT estimates. These dollars are not needed for any MPO staffing or planning work because this has already been met with our original allocations that we were provided with in 2020 to develop our current Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program. So these dollars can be held by the MPO as reserve funds, or they could be rolled into the next project application process, or a combination of both. And also something to keep in mind here is that our current carryover balance or our current reserve is $230,000. Next slide. So this table shows available funds remaining from our future year allocations for fiscal years 2025 through 2027 that are associated with the development of our next MTIP. So the top line item shows the amounts available. The second line item, these numbers are the result of MPO staff coming together, knowing past and current amounts needed for planning and staffing, and then estimating future amounts needed for staffing and work items that we expect to take place during this time frame. And the third line item noted as to MPO reserve, 80,000 was the number that MPO staff developed by taking the bullet point listed items into consideration. So, potential amounts needed for contributions to the travel model update, possible planning support work needed, project cost increases, potentially funding a project out of the Bend pedestrian network implementation plan that's currently in process, and also keeping in mind that we do have a current reserve balance of $230,000. So we felt that 80,000 per year would be a reasonable amount for these years to put into reserve for future use of these items listed, and on top of that $230,000 balance. Next slide. So this table shows all of our years of available funds that we just went over. It deducts the amounts estimated to be needed for MPO planning and staffing, and also deducts a reserve amount per year, that 80,000. So the bottom line item, the highlighted line, is the staff recommendations on amounts that could go to the MPO's competitive project application process that will be beginning this fall. And then the next slide is simply, questions, comments, or possible motion. Are there, so now I just want to open up for any questions here, comments about the proposed or staff recommended amounts that could go to our next project application process.
Any questions? I don't see any. It sounds to me like this is going to mean there's more money that is flexible for the MPO policy board and for policy staff. And the only other comment I will make is applying for and getting grants is, really the way that we can make our dollars work is by leveraging the little bit of funding we have in order to attain grants for much larger bits of funding. So I think this all sounds good and sounds like what the policy board has been indicating in past meetings about these Stbg funds. So I'd be happy to entertain a motion.
I move to approve funding to the Bend MPO competitive project application process for fiscal years 2022 to 2027 as presented / revised.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion from Commissioner Chang and a second from Mr. Abbas. Is there any discussion? I haven't said that today.
Hand up. Go ahead, Cameron.
Sorry. Had a question. The presented / revised, did we actually revise the motion that was stated in the agenda?
No, Cameron, I put the revised word in there just in case the board did revise it. So it's as presented.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Cameron. All right, all those in favor, did we already say this? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Cameron. Thanks for keeping us on track. And then Hovey, Tyler, did you want to just mention those next steps there?
Yeah, Andrea, would you like to step in and just give a quick update?
Sure. Yeah. So so for the July TAC and policy board meetings, we will be, or I'll be bringing back our original application, and we'll be reviewing the criteria that we used back in 2020 to see if we still want to use that or if we want to change anything. And then in September, that's when we expect the application submittal to open.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Andrea.
Yep.
That gets us to agenda item number 8. This is the Ride Bend Microtransit Pilot Project. And Toby Marks from the City of Bend, Casey Berg from OSU Cascades are here with us today. Is that right?
Yes.
Yep.
Hi, Toby. Hi, Casey. Welcome. Hi, Casey.
Hi, good to see you guys.
Yeah,
You
good
too.
to see everybody.
You too. Hi, Toby.
Would you like us to get started right away?
Go right ahead.
Okay, let me share my screen. I have a quick presentation prepared. And I'm just excited to be able to be here and to present that and give you an update on the work that has been going into, let me do this differently. I think now you can see yourself here, right? Want to give you an update on the work, that we have been, okay, let me start over. That all was just completely scrambled. really happy to be here and give you an update about Right Bend and the work that has been going into shaping this as a program with long-term vision and helping to transition some of our partners like CET and others to really into more future innovative approaches to transit. And I think you're going to be actually very excited about that. And I want to open with that I'm also a little bit excited that you just said leftover money. So maybe there's something we can work out on that someday. But here to talk about Right Bend, and let me put this on the screen. Can you all see this?
Yes.
Okay, great. So as you all know, there's multiple agencies in Bend working on transit and transportation, and each one of them have multiple visions, goals, and strategies how to make transit better in the future. And I must apologize, the city council goal might be one from the original city council session. So if I got this wrong, just like correct me on that. But we know that city council in general has the goal to design and build and maintain a connected multimodal transportation system that's accessible and equitable to everybody who uses this and comes to the city of Bend, whether we live here or we visit here. We want to make sure that everybody has access to that. We know that the TSP, the Transportation System Plan of the city of Bend, talks about partnering with public and private sectors to test and implement new mobility technologies, evaluate them, and even do pilot projects to see, do they work for Bend? Because what works in Portland or what works in Ottawa or wherever else might not necessarily be the right fit for Bend. And we know that CET's master plan calls for goals to evaluate emerging technologies, transit service models, and how they might be used to support transit options in Central Oregon, and to work on really establishing CET as an integrated provider for all things transportation in Bend. That said, the circle of change, right? Like a lot of things are changing. Nobody foresaw that we have a COVID pandemic that is like disrupting transit or transportation or the life of everybody the way that it did. But we are here in Bend and we have what we call in our little mobility working group, new mobility working group, that circle of change. We know we have these plans, they're great plans that have a lot of outlines, goals for the future, like the transportation system plan, the CET master plan, city council's vision like I already mentioned. But we also know that new things are coming our way that are being decided at this time, which include climate-friendly city rulings, a new innovation mobility fund from ODOT, and then TMA or TDM requirements from DEQ. And I might have scrambled some, but you can keep me honest on that later. We also know that the City of Bend's Climate Action Plan calls to reduce fossil fuels use in Bend by 40% by 2030 and 70% by 2050. And there are only certain ways how we can achieve that, and transportation can be one of them. Now, we have a few partners that have worked with us to really think through, ideate through, innovate through how we can bring Right Bend back. And that includes the City of Bend, that's why I'm talking. That includes Casey Berg, that's why he's on the screen. That includes, in general, OSU Cascades in the Mobility Lab. It includes Brian Podman, who is also here with Commute Options. We have a lot of conversation with him lately about this program. And includes CET and Cascade East Transit. And I know that Derek is in the room too, so I'm sure he will answer your questions about this as well. And that's exciting because there's a unified front of people that want to find a way to make this happen and improve and innovate our transit system. And I think, to not drag this out too long, I think this is a good moment to really give a shout out to everybody at COICC and CET that they had it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy over the last 2 years to maintain what we do in transit and to push forward. And often it can be forgotten that while we struggle every day to get something going or to actually to maintain our operations, to envision the future. And I think I can speak for like Casey and me and others probably here. It has been a blast meeting with Derek, Andrea, and Tammy and see them still being future oriented as much as they struggle with their day to day. And I think that earns a lot of kudos and respect. That said, why are we here, right? The 50,000-foot view is that OSU Cascades, Mobility Lab, City of Bend, and CET have been meeting since about February this year to find a way to bring Right Bend back. And if you remember, we did a Right Bend pilot project in 2018, 2019 that was just over the summer month, this summer seasons. It was very successful, had good ridership numbers. And we wanted to see, is there a way to bring this back? This would transitioning some routes in low density areas to an innovative system that's leveraging customer service oriented on-demand microtransit systems. And this is something that we really would be very excited about if the infrastructure and the market would allow for that, is to leverage electric vehicles and make this an innovative, completely sustainable program. So rather than having the vendor that would operate that go with gas-powered vehicles, make it a fully electric system that actually would be supported by our climate action plan and other ideas that we have. The way that we envision this would be a 12-month long time frame that would be actually happening in 3 phases. So there would be an initial 3-month phase, then a 6-month phase, and then a 3-month phase. Not with the goal to end, but really with the goal to evaluate the program, fine-tune it, and find a way to, after that 12 months, make it a permanent program that's anchored and rooted in CET. And while I'm not, please don't misunderstand, I'm not trying to speak for them, but it just makes logical sense that a transit system is anchored and managed and has the oversight is in CET, right? We have as of yet not determined the start date. And that's very important to know. That original, I think when we started talking about this, we're like, hey, let's do this summer. And then we're all like, then reality checks in and you're like, how the heck are we going to make that happen, right? If you just want to run it for the summer, maybe, but not if you really want this to be long-term with a future in mind, just not possible. Now, how would these 3 phases work? I know this picture is blurry. I don't know why. I couldn't have a better one, but that's what I have. So basically, we would divide the system for Right Bend into 3 different routes or zones, right? There would be the rec zone that would offer daily on-demand and shuttle services from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. And in doing so, also close some of the gaps that CET has in the later times of the day where they don't have drivers or don't have routes. That rec zone is that zone in blue, really the downtown core destination centers up South Highway 3rd Street, 97 and 3rd Street, up to the Village Center. Is that what it is up there? Cascade Village, yeah. And then like west of downtown with destination centers like Galveston, Newport, all those areas. Basically, there would be 4 to 5 vans that were circulating around these areas. People would be able to call them on demand, would be picked up and dropped off where they want to go. Then that would operate for 3 months. Then we would expand to include a commuter route. We would identify park and ride locations to the north and to the south of the city. And there would be doing like high traffic morning hours, 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. and 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday. There would be dedicated vehicles, 2 to 3, that are riding that route so that we could give commuters that are coming into the city to work an option to, instead of driving in with their car, having to find parking, taking up traffic, to jump on a van and go to where they need to go. And then we would operate that for about 6 months. And then we would transition to include the new routes 8 and 9 that are being built currently. I think we're currently building the infrastructure on the east side around the Murphy corridor. We would include those to that, and then we would operate all of it. And we would have probably about 10 or 11 vehicles in the mix, which at that time it becomes really, really exciting because we could operate what's called a deviated route daily from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. on these new routes 8 and 9, where there's a fixed route, but the vehicle would go a quarter mile to the east, quarter mile to the north to pick up people that want to be picked up, right? A lot of flexibility. But the other flexibility that comes into this is that now we have 10, 11 vehicles in the mix. So if you want to offer and adjust their schedule for special events, for shuttle services during high season, we could actually do that and become very, very flexible. to give you a little bit more in-depth look into that, what I just talked about, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. You can see the routes there. You know what you heard me saying this right now. Phase 1, 4 vehicles, or vans. Phase 2, 6, and then we would go up to 11 or in phase 3. The monthly operational cost, and that's an estimate that's based on proposals that we received. We actually got proposals from 2 vendors, from Via, which is a very known national company, and then from the Downtowner, who you might remember because they operated Right Bend here in 2018 and 19. So these numbers are based on the estimates that to operate phase 1, it would be about $60,000 a month, a year, that would be nice, a month. To operate phase 2, you're looking at about $78,000, and phase 3 would be about $147,000 every month. And one item I really want to mention, because I think it's really important, each of these phases would include an ADA accessible vehicle. So it's really, we're trying to make this as equitable and accessible as a project and program to every community member that we have. Now, the fun part, the budget, right? So how would this all shake out? So we estimate currently that the 12-month operation would be an average of $1.2 million. That's an aggregated number, right? Based on like what each phase costs, and then we adding to that. We have funding commitments at this time from the City of Bend, from CET, and from Visit Bend of about $250,000. The Visit Bend funding is for 2023. All the City of Bend and CET funding would be for 2023 and 2024. We project a revenue of about $225,000. And yes, it's a revenue-based program. It's not a free program. I think that would not be feasible to do, but our revenue assumptions are based on the actual ridership from 2018 and 2019 multiplied up to the increased routes, and then an estimate of what a trip would cost based on what CET is currently charging for recreational shuttles, and what we know out of experience, how much it would cost to take an Uber from like downtown to your home when you live somewhere, right? And then we have a potential, and I probably should have had, so that Derek doesn't like jump through the screen, I probably should have put an asterisk behind route 8 and 9, or double asterisk, to saying there is the potential that we could I believe there's a potential, and it's fair to say, that we could reallocate some of the funding CET already has received to operate routes 8 and 9 in the future, to use it to support this program. If that funding could be used for that, and I believe, don't want to say the wrong thing, and I might talk a little bit more than usual if that's even possible, but that would require CET to request a change in funding with the county commission, just as a disclaimer. If that all would come to be like this, we have about a shortfall or deficit, a projected deficit of around $300,000. Let's be honest, 300 to 500,000, depending on the revenue numbers, maybe less, right? But we're really excited about it. And we know that, especially on the EV possibility, that there probably wasn't a better time than now to do that, as new companies are like releasing new electric vans, new electric transportation systems that actually are affordable and not like outrageous anymore. And that we know that currently is a time where there was never so much grant funding available to build the infrastructure to actually make that possible to charge these vehicles, right? So I think there's a lot of opportunity here right now. And that is one of the major reasons why we decided to say we don't really want to lock the start date in, because we really want to make sure that this is a solid program that can be done right, that can be done setting a stake for the future. And if there's a sustainable options, we can make that happen. With that, you have the opportunity to ask me any question you like. And I also would like your advice to ask you, if there, as a MPO policy board, if there would be an opportunity for the MPO to fund a program like this, what would you suggest us to do? Would you suggest that we're coming back for the competitive cycle to put in an application for a 1 year or 2 year funding request? Or would you see that this is an opportunity where, because it's such a great program, that the MPO policy board might be interested in making a special funding opportunity available to us. But I'll leave that up to you because I think that's where the decision should be made.
Thank you, Toby. Are there any questions for Toby? Go ahead, Commissioner Chan.
So do we think this thing is working? Okay.
Yep, that one should work.
So currently we have this sort of constellation of service. We've got CET fixed route, we've got dial-a-ride, we've got Ubers and Lyfts and taxis and things like that. How do you know that there will actually be demand for this service if you create it? I mean, it seems like people's needs are pretty well met by those, what we've already got. But I'm trying to understand like whether there really is an additional niche here.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think that I would probably ask Casey to jump in there a little bit more. He has a little bit more knowledge on that. My personal opinion is that I think that we know that Right Bend was adapted very well in 2018-19. So we have that data. We could have been better always, but we have that data. We also know one thing. We know that our transit service, and Casey, this is the last thing I say, then you can jump in there. I think in my opinion, a little bit what I've learned is that our system currently is really targeting need riders, not choice riders. And I think there's a huge opportunity, and I always look at it myself, and I'll be quite frankly, if you would tell me take the bus, I will tell you, no way, it's not convenient for me, it's not, why would I? And I think we underestimate that somebody like me, and while that is not a data point, that's my opinion, I would take the bus. If it's convenient to me, I would have a monthly pass for my kids that are going to school if I know I have a safe service that can pick them up, right? I would totally do that, and I would pay for that. And I think that's the opportunity, and I think that's hard to measure. But Casey, did you want to add something to that?
Sure, yeah. Well, first of all, if you're not familiar with when we ran Ride Bend 2018, 2019, I managed the contract with Downtowner. So we definitely saw in that case, we replaced a fixed route service with this on-demand model, and definitely saw, number one, more people utilizing it, but the level of customer service that they experienced was significantly higher. So drawing more people that didn't typically ride transit onto a shared vehicle service. So then the other thing I think Toby was missing here, not to his own discredit, but routes 8 and 9 are something that CET is looking at adding. So those don't exist today. So those would be serving Southeast Bend and Northeast Bend. And therefore we're looking at, instead of putting a fixed route service in place where it doesn't exist, starting with this model. And in general, this model works better when you have lower density neighborhoods. So you're not trying to run a fixed route down one road and hoping people are going to walk there or bike there. Now you're coming into the neighborhood, getting closer to their home. And hopefully, again, that generates more demand. So again, this is kind of, I call it like Ride Bend 2.0, in that we're looking at applying that same service model to new regions of Bend. And again, I feel like it's right sized, so more efficient in areas where there's lower density. And then I guess the last thing I'll say is just, Toby's hopefully alluded to this, but I think there's interest from a small group of us, some CET staff included, that this transit model might actually be a better model for all of Bend, minus a few of their core or key routes. So this is in the transit master plan as well, that they would provide frequent routes on Greenwood and 3rd Street, but that you could potentially see more efficient transit service to all of Bend with on-demand services meeting the lower density areas, picking up people closer to their home and getting more people to share rides. And then electric vehicles in the future, create that opportunity to meet some of these additional climate goals that we have.
Could I, thank you so much. Thanks, Toby. Thank you, Casey. I think I want to make the comment that in 2018 and 2019, those pilot programs were free, weren't they?
Yes,
And this year, it will be a paid service. Is that, or what? I don't, this program, is that right?
that's right.
Hmm.
And I think just for me to jump in there, I think there's a lot of conversation that we have in our like new mobility working group, which is it's like a working group that we started between the city of Bend, the Cascade, OSU Cascades Mobility Lab, a couple other stakeholders about, is there an opportunity to like be more flexible and have some ideas and innovation on like monthly passes, right? Like that are beyond just like the bus pass, but that include like shuttle service and all those things. That's that idea. I think that's very in ideation. So I don't want to say this as something that we have figured out, but I think the key is to see that I always remember, and Derek can confirm that I hear CET saying that the summer ride the river shuttle is probably one of the most successful programs in the country, I think sometimes Andrea says, because it's actually paying for itself, right? And so we know that if the service is good, if the quality is good, people are actually willing to pay for that. We can see other case studies where the shift to an on-demand microtransit system actually that is revenue-based actually is working very successful, that people are actually willing to pay for it if they get the customer service and the quality, and it gets them to where they want in a convenient way. And I think one item that's really important to note is that the operational cost itself is a positive argument to consider this type of service. And now while I'm not, please know that I am not the transit professional, right? Not my background. That's why we talk so much with CET about these programs. But often we like to innovate and find new ideas through that. But we can see that the operating hours proposed from for this program would be about $63 an hour, where I think that CET operates like at $95 an hour. So there's cost savings that can be found too by increasing a customer service with a program like this.
What are the implications in terms of drivers? Would you need more drivers, or would you need a comparable number of drivers? And are the requirements for drivers lower, or they need a different license or things like that?
Yep, that's a great question. So there's less requirements because the vehicles are all like usually they're 6 or 8 seater vans, just like your Ford E-Economy, or Ford Transit, or like a Volkswagen or Mercedes van. Or in some cases, depending on the demand, they're like even just minivans, right? Like a Toyota Sienna or anything else. So it's like can be driven with with a driver with a regular driver's license, no CDL requirement. There is of course background checks and stuff that would be done before people are hired, right? That's a different story. But from the requirement to drive, you and I could drive it if we wanted to. I think that that opens up that's my understanding of it. That opens up the opportunity to hire people better than if there are more strict requirements behind it.
But would you need more drivers total than if you were trying to serve the same number of people with fixed route systems? Or I mean, you guys were talking about how this could be an alternative to doing Route 8 and 9 for a little while. And I mean, if you put those two things next to each other, are the number of drivers required greater for the micro transit or greater for the fixed routes?
Yep, that's a great question. I think it would really depend on how many vehicles are in the mix, right? So I think that the way that it's proposed right now, if the way that it looks right now on paper is that if we would have 5 vehicles or 4 or 5 vehicles that would circulate route 8-9 corridor, that would transition into 4 to 5 drivers. Where if that would be 1 vehicle on route 8, 1 vehicle on route 9, that's a larger bus that would circulate, that would be 2. So there's potentially more opportunity for employment, and which, out of fairness, in today's environment, might also be a bigger of a challenge to find people, which I think was probably, if I can't see you really because you're like this small on the screen, so I can't read your facial impressions like very well. But I think that's probably
what I
always
was
a
worried
concern
about, the
behind it.
hiring environment. Yeah. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, we completely understand that.
That's exactly my concern, is drivers. I feel like I've been involved in a lot of discussions, and not even all of those discussions are about transportation. A lot of them are about housing, in particular, transitional and emergency housing ideas that have come up to this brick wall of drivers that we just, trying to provide any kind of shuttle service, additional services, it's that driver consideration that keeps thwarting us. And so I guess I feel like we want to be kind of shovel ready if drivers are what we're trying to be ready for. We want to have programs and buses and ideas for if and when we can hire those drivers. So, I understand that takes a certain amount of money, but I don't want us spending a bunch of money only, again, to hit this huge obstacle that we really just have no control over. So that is my concern. I know you all understand that very well. And then the other comment I would throw out there, and this is, so what about the concerts? Have you all discussed shuttle buses for those concerts at the old mill? Again, I am not the transit expert. I am not somebody who is training in this, but that seems like the other opportunity for something that is very much like Ride the River, where all the people are trying to go to the exact same place. They all want to go home at the same time. And, the opportunity for shuttle buses for that. Have you, I'll go ahead and ask if you've discussed that at all.
Yeah, and we have discussed it in some of our conversations, and I think Gary can jump into that maybe from the transit perspective if he's willing to while he's sitting next to you at the table. But the flexibility that I think your concerns are all valid, which is why we a little bit said we really don't feel we can say we need to start this in July or August or October. I think there's more trends that need to be observed when it comes to employment. There need to be, that's why I've tried to be very clear of saying like, we want this to succeed when we start, and we want to have our ducks in a row on all levels so that it can become part of the transit landscape in the city, serve people well, and become part of what we do. But the flexibility of a program like this is in servicing events like that, right? Because suddenly you have these vehicles that can rotate more often, right? And you can, and again, you could, from my logical thinking, you can then, if you have 5 vehicles that circulate from 7 to 9 a.m. in the morning and from 4 to 7, and they're not in circulation in between, you can reallocate them to circulate a certain route to get people to and from an event. And I think if that continues like this year, we all need that, right? Because it can only grow, and it's a pain in the butt, as good, with all respect, because it's awesome, but it is a pain when you're driving a car.
Absolutely.
Andrea's had her hand up.
Thank you. Andrea, go ahead.
Hey, Toby, so my question's about the, your slide about the funding sources or funding that you already have dedicated or discussed. And so the funding that you have or you expect from CET, are those FTA dollars? Can this program be funded by FTA dollars? I'm curious.
They're STIF dollars, so they're
Okay.
not they're flexible.
They're state dollars. Okay, that was my question. Thank you.
Thanks, Derek.
Yeah, and I can chime in on the drivers and the events. So with drivers, everyone knows we've had a hard time hiring drivers, retaining drivers. Our Bend fixed routes are on a reduced Saturday service during the week, except for routes 1 and 6. We actually increased the frequency of those. Still struggling to find enough community connector drivers to do our Saturday regional service. So that is an ongoing challenge. We do have a non-CDL, so those are all CDL buses. That's, anything over 14 passengers, you need a commercial driver's license. Anything under, which we're purchasing smaller vehicles, we're purchasing more vans, smaller fleet, especially for routes 8 and 9. Then thinking about, if those could shift to some kind of microtransit model, we would have the infrastructure to be able to support that with using some vans. And so I think, there could be kind of a hybrid model in the future, like fixed route runs between 7 a.m. and 6, and then microtransit service kind of kicks in the evening and provides that later service need, right? There's just not enough need or demand for that service in the evening to make fixed route efficient. But in the morning and throughout the day, we could still run the fixed routes. We can also do deviated flex routes where the bus, a smaller bus, does the route. And I'll talk about the bus stops we're planning on routes 8 and 9 on my presentation. And then it can, go off into the neighborhoods. It can deviate off that route. It has time built in. We have the technology for kind of app-based demand, kind of calling like an Uber or Lyft. It's just shared rides. The bus picks them up. So it doesn't have to stay with the same geography. It can serve a greater area and then get back on the route and stick to its schedule and go around. So there's, I think these are early discussions are for us to come up with a strategy of how we want to be more innovative, how we want to use smaller vehicles. There's also potential to contract with Downtowner, which is a third-party service, and let them provide drivers and hire that. And then, because we can't operate routes 8 and 9 on a fixed route if we don't have the drivers.
Right.
And we have the funding in place to operate those routes, but we can't spend the money because we don't have the drivers.
That's right.
So this is potentially a solution and a partnership to help us kind of overcome some of these obstacles and help, City of Bend residents get to where they need to go without having to drive their cars. So we're kind of thinking through this, and I applaud Casey and Toby. They put a lot of time and effort into kind of thinking this through. They've been meeting with us. I think a lot of things are up for discussion, but the goal is to really have a strategy moving forward where we feel confident that we can test some pilot ideas, we can retain some of the fixed route service. And then once we have mobility hubs, we're hopeful that the picture kind of all comes together. And I'll share some data from a recent survey that we pushed out that kind of helps align with what this vision is of microtransit and shared mobility and things like that. So hopefully that helps kind of answer some of your questions.
For me, that helps a lot. That really, just reassures me that everybody's working together and everybody's talking, and this program is not going to pull buses from our fixed route system, but instead, so thank you so much, Derek. And thank you, Toby and Casey. We are starting to, looking at the clock, we do have one more presentation, and our last presentation is Derek, so it's very much related. So in response to your question to us, Toby, of, just how do you ask this body for money? Should it be through the usual process?
process. And the one thing I will say to you is I'm very sorry to say that this meeting in particular is not a good meeting to ask us anything. I am here from the city of Bend, and David is filling in. We simply have one member we need to appoint that will probably be one of our new counselors. And so I really don't want this policy board making any, heavy decisions today. So, I'm sorry to say that to you. I hope you don't feel like you've wasted your time at all. It's been
No,
okay, because I think it's been incredibly valuable. And like you said, I feel so much better having heard this and learned how, I really have worried about so many different, honestly, ideas and agencies all coming to that same bottleneck.
yeah,
So,
so let me just jump in.
sure.
My intention was not for you to write a check today.
Of course,
My
yeah.
intention was really like, hey, what's the right approach for the future? Is this something we bring to the policy board or competitive circle? And I think what I hope you can see is that there is a lot of partner involvement in this, and it's actually a lot of fun to see what can happen when everybody comes together at the table.
Absolutely. So we will be in touch with you, Toby and Casey. By we, I mean Tyler and myself, and we absolutely will figure out how to, where's the next agenda point when we do talk about funding, and we will invite you back again. And for now, I will thank you so much. Thanks for all of your work on this. Thanks for your presentation to this board. And then I think we will go ahead and move on to item number 9. Derek, I didn't leave you as much time as I had hoped, but here you go.
Yeah, I will, just a moment.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Derek Hoffbauer. I'm with Cascades East Transit. I just wanted to give you kind of an update on what CET is up to these days, what our ridership looks like on our Bend fixed routes. Talk a little bit about our recreation services, and then talk about mobility hubs, which are kind of the next new exciting thing that we're doing with our partners. You could go ahead to the next slide. So just so you guys know, I think this has a lot to do with gas prices, but the good news is we've seen our fixed route ridership increase, so 16% from October last year. Because remember, we had this pandemic, and then it dropped about 50%. Stayed there for a while, and now it's slowly coming back up.
Great.
So that's kind of an October 21 to March 22 comparison. It's a good time to compare things because it's not involving summer vacation. Kids are in schools. We typically look to those months when we want to look at how ridership is changing over time. And just to give you an idea, in October, the fixed route, the whole fixed route system, so this is not dial-a-ride, this is just the Bend routes, 11,678 rides, and that increased to 13,627 rides for the month of March. So we're still seeing a pretty good amount of rides. I mean, to have 13,000 rides in March, I think is pretty successful. We're achieving some good occupancy, and it's a good kind of return on investment. Like Toby said, we're spending, about 95 an hour. We've had to increase our rates for our drivers to get more drivers at the door. Fuel's more expensive, and our services are actually currently free right now. They've been free since the beginning of the pandemic. Bend fixed route, dial-a-ride, and community connectors. But we're looking to re-implement fares probably early next year. The challenge with bringing back fares right now in Bend is that we have a lower frequency service, and we don't have enough drivers to do the frequent service. So it's fewer runs per day, and the routes start a little later in the morning, and they don't go as late in the evening. So it's, we don't really consider it to be fair to the community to charge full price for a service that's not as frequent as it was. And so, we're hopeful with some changes in staff. Our rural operations supervisor is now working for NTM Transit. He's their general manager. So he kind of went from CET to over to a contractor. But in his position there, he's very knowledgeable of the system. He's looking at ways to kind of maybe redesign the routes so we can have fewer drivers be able to run that at a greater frequency. So we're kind of in that planning phase right now and looking to how we can maximize the efficiency of our service and bring back those routes, those Bend routes, to their full frequency. We hear that all the time from our customers. And then we can start charging fares. And that's kind of the plan moving forward with that. And so when we look at routes 1 and 6, so like I said, everything is on a Saturday, like a reduced Saturday schedule during the week, except we did increase routes 1 and 6, the frequency. We brought those back to 30 minutes. And we actually saw that ridership jump 36% for Route 1 and 63%
Wow.
for Route 6. And so you can see that when you increase the frequency of the routes, you get a lot more ridership and you get a lot more demand on the system. So that's good. So we're hopefully doing that kind of piecemeal. As we add more drivers, we'll look at our next highest ridership, maybe it's Route 7 going up to the hospital, and we'll bring that frequency up more, and we'll see that ridership go up. So it's kind of an incremental process until we can really get a handle on this driver situation and figure out how to get more drivers in the door. The next project I want to talk about is we do have 30 ADA compliant bus stops that will be constructed within the summer. I'm routing a contract now with a construction company that's going to build them. We had them designed last year. We did some public engagement, went out to all the neighborhood associations, asked them about the route, some of the stop locations. And so we'll be building those. The challenge is we don't have enough drivers to operate them. It was supposed to have started once the bus stops were in place this fall, but we're probably looking at next year. And that's where this concept of, we have the funding through the Statewide Transportation Improvement Program that comes through Deschutes County to implement these routes, and we aren't using it. So if we could have an interim solution of hiring downtowner to come in and they have the drivers and they can pilot microtransit, which is what our transit master plan states, that that's an appropriate way to begin these routes, and or pilot a deviated flex route service where it can go off the route. But the bus stops, they're just concrete pads right now, so they're not going anywhere. If we need to wait a few years to have until the area densifies a little more, that's certainly a possibility. So we wanted to get the stops into the infrastructure in now before costs continue to go up. So it's a good time to do that. I just want to let you know that that's on its way. And then, we talked about microtransit for the private service planning. Just wanted to make sure I wove that into the presentation, but we already discussed that. Tyler, you can go to the next slide. With the recreation services, Ride the River and Lava Butte, they started this weekend. It was very cold, so we didn't see a lot of ridership, but I think we got about 60 rides yesterday as it warmed up. So I'm guessing, and as Toby said, that service does generate income and almost pays for itself. So that's a really good model. We're continuing to, operate those throughout the summer. We were not able to operate the Mount Bachelor summer service, which we have a stakeholder group. We have the funding for that. So we're looking at trying to do that next summer and pilot that. That was up to from here to Mount Bachelor and then to Elk Lake with the circulator shuttle, which is not enough drivers to implement that service. And then Mount Bachelor was really successful. We did a lot better compared to last year, but we're still a little under where we were pre-pandemic. And then our fares this year were $6 one way and $10 round trip option. A lot of employees, Mount Bachelor employees, using that service in the winter. Okay, just a quick overview. We did really well on our ODOT discretionary grants. So these are from Surface Transportation Block grants with some FTA funding. And pretty much all of these are like Bend or Deschutes County related. So replacing our vehicles, again, looking to smaller vehicles, more nimble vehicles, considering, hopefully we can get more non-CDL drivers in, so there are less requirements for those. The Hawthorne Station parking lot redesign, and that project would essentially take all of the bus queuing that's on street that's causing a lot of the issues with the neighbors and pulling that into the parking lot. We have the design. I believe the city had just approved the designs from the architecture firm, and we're looking at starting that next spring to do construction on that. And so, that'll greatly improve the safety and kind of the site visibility of Hawthorne Station and make our neighbors a lot happier,
Yeah.
which is a good thing. Management, that's more kind of vehicle mechanics, just making that more efficient, enhanced mobility management. That's to hire a travel trainer to work with people currently using the dial-a-ride system, which is an eligibility-based system. Let's say they live right down the street from the bus stop, but essentially they go out and show those individuals how to use the fixed route system to make their trips. And so that's an exciting project. And then we have some on-site security. We have resources to make Hawthorne Station, make sure that that's supervised. And then some new security and technology equipment. And the slides on. Okay, so mobility hubs. So just a little feedback or a little background on this, and Andre, you can chime in if you want. So mobility hubs are places where a lot of different modes of transportation come together. You have buses, you have potentially some on-demand shuttles, bike share. As you know, now we have bike share in Bend, so incorporating electric bikes, potentially electric scooters, food carts, placemaking, places where people can get to and from their destinations without needing to use a private vehicle. And so the background for this study is, mobility hubs are relatively new in the United States. And so we wanted to learn more about them, what peer agencies are doing, what are they finding successful, what are the lessons learned, what did they do wrong that we could learn from and do it better. And so we do have some funding for this. It's a combination of STIF funds, statewide transportation improvement funds, the general obligation bond. I believe there's some MPO funds, the Stbg fund as well. And so I think it's roughly around 10 million or a little over that. So we have this money to build these things, and we're looking on some guidance on how to find the desired location. And then how to phase these in a way that makes sense for our community members. And so really, we're looking to do some public engagement. The study itself is a TGM grant, so ODOT provided the funding to do the grant. The MPO is going to manage the contract, and then CET is doing the public engagement. And so what we're doing is we have an online survey. It just went out on Thursday. And then we're doing a lot of interactive tabling events. I think we have about 8 events scheduled in June and July, working with Zavi at the City of Bend and going to some Spanish-speaking communities with all our materials in Spanish. So we have a lot of great events, and we have a survey station at Hawthorne Station for our riders who don't have cell phones or smartphones to come and give us information. And then the coolest thing that I learned is that I pushed this out on Thursday, and I was out of town on vacation for the weekends camping. And I came back when I had service, and I was expecting maybe 20 or 30 responses, 325 responses in 6 days on an online survey. I think that's in part to the partnership with the City of Bend and helping share that via their Facebook page. But it's a lot of interest. And next slide, I just want to do a quick rundown. I didn't want to put a lot of numbers on here because it's just 5 days and it's through July. So this all is going to probably change. But a lot of responses from Northeast Bend residents. They're taking the lead right now. But pretty much, everybody was within Bend. So it's good that, our community members are the ones that are responding. In terms of priority location, we asked people, hey, where do you want us to put these things? We want to confirm what the study is really pointing out, what has the most feasibility in terms of land availability, price. That's what the study's doing, and we're really hoping to kind of confirm this with the community. So we have downtown, followed by Old Mill / Core Pine, East Bend, North Bend, OSU Cascades, South Bend, and COCC. And that's exactly what the study is recommending. So it's good to see that lining up with the public engagement part. And we asked, what are your most common transportation barriers? Bus isn't convenient. That was number one. So, having some kind of microtransit, I think, would help people be able to, access transit easier than they currently do. Concerns riding a bike, walking, or rolling. So that these were safety concerns that they expressed. And then driving is too expensive. That's likely from gas prices. And then we asked them, what types of trips would you take if you were going to be using those mobility hubs? And social activities, shopping and errands, medical appointments for the top three. Work and school fell a little below, but I expect that to creep up as the survey goes along. And then we asked, what kind of modes are you excited about? And it was bicycle, followed by bus, followed by on-demand shuttles, and then walking, rolling. And then their top motivations for using mobility hubs is they wanted frequent and reliable bus trips without having to transfer. That was number one. Saving money, and then having them in a safe and comfortable environment to be able to utilize these, and then having some kind of park and ride, where they could leave their vehicle, hop on an electric bike or an electric scooter, an on-demand shuttle, be able to get to the trips and come back. And then nearly 9 out of 10 said they were either very supportive or somewhat supportive of mobility hubs in Bend. So that was a question to just kind of gauge, what the public's overall feelings about mobility hub were into. It's very positive. And then in addition, we got, I think, 224 comments about how we could make mobility hubs better and what we could do to, incorporate some of their feedback. And so it's a really exciting process. Stay tuned. We'll finish up the study in July. Our last TAC meeting is in July. And then the consultant will come up with some recommendations, based on some of this public engagement and the conclusions from the data portion of the study.
Thank you so much, Derek.
You're welcome.
Any
Thank you.
questions for Derek? I will apologize for leaving you so little time.
It's okay.
But I hope I'm sure you noticed, it was because we're so interested in transit. We were asking Casey and Toby so many transit questions. We didn't leave any time for you to have questions.
No.
But thank you so much. We always appreciate these updates, especially on those mobility hubs. We're all really excited about that. Agenda item number 10. Tyler, any other business you'd like to mention?
No.
The one thing that I would like to mention are those blue bird bikes. The bike share program, we at the MPO did contribute funding to this program. So I just wanted to mention, it is a pilot program. It is being updated by the minute. All of the bikes are going to get stickers that are more visible with an individual identifying number, so that if you see a bike that is someplace where it should not be, if it's being used in a way where it should not be, you'll be able to report to the bird bike company with a specific number. I saw a number 006 that will then allow them to, frankly, fine those users who are not using them the way they should. And we have real timelines as far as if we do not see 75% compliance within just 2 weeks, we will change the program so that those bikes just can't be left like they are now. The step up would be you have to leave them at a public bike rack. So I just want to let the public know, we have not just thrown these things around the city saying good luck, happy summer. We do have plans. We are making changes, honestly, minute by minute. And, with that in mind, please do write us, let us know if you see any problems, if you have any ideas. We're happy to hear your feedback. That's honestly what we're trying to look for. It's a pilot program. We need that feedback in order to understand if this is something that could work long-term. So thank you so much for that. And then we do have a last opportunity for public comment. If there's anyone who would like to do a super quick, I might give you 15 seconds to talk to the policy board. I don't see anyone there. The next regular meeting is scheduled for July 19th at noon. It will be an in-person meeting with that remote participation option. And with that, I will adjourn this meeting of the Bend MPO. Thank you, everyone. Happy summer vacation if anyone's taking the summer vacation. We are adjourned.